Welcome to my first ever tutorial. I really hope you enjoy it. Now what we're going to start off with today is the sketch. So the very beginning of everything, I'm showing you the initial sketch of the original illustration that I've done, and it's all based on this Instagram post here. So I'm going to be taking you through the whole process from the sketch to thinking about how to clean up the line work, to going from black and white to color, rendering, cleaning it up. And yeah, I hope you get a lot out of this and enjoy. So the main things I'm thinking about when it comes to the initial sketch is being super loose, number one, right? Being really loose, not getting too caught up into the details, but really thinking about the 2D shapes, right? I always preach about thinking 3D, which is what I do consistently, right? All the time I'm thinking in 3D. But at this very early stage, I like to think about the 2D shapes, right? So even things like the nose here, the eyes, literally just cut off circles, right? The mouth, two triangles, one on top of the other. And I'm just going back and forth with the reference and trying to simplify things as much as I can. Now this takes practice, right? So something I've practiced a lot is simplification, because I came from a background of doing very realistic, like using the reference verbatim and getting all the details and etc, etc. So here it took a while to really start to understand simplification, and a lot of it has to come down to these simple 2D shapes that you can build off of. Well, this is how I like to work, at least at the moment. So really simple 2D shapes. Now here the brush I'm using is Ahmed Aldori's hard elliptical. Right, it's I think it's actually free on his Gumroad, so go check that out. With a little bit of smoothing, okay? The smoothing's my secret weapon. All right, so without smoothing, I can still hit these shapes if I want to. All right, get these simple shapes, and I recommend you actually practice without the smoothing, just to sort of get used to creating simple shapes, or just like nice line work without the smoothing. But this does help just smooth things out a little bit more. It's hard to kind of demonstrate without you being here and actually doing it yourself, but yeah, give the smoothing a go. And you'll notice here in the original sketch, I'm still thinking a little bit in 3D, right? So you see these contour lines around this initial triangle shape. So I'm starting really simple, really simple. But even at this stage, I can sort of sneak in a little bit of 3D. All right, so I've got a bit of center line going there. The hands will go somewhere around here. And this might be where I'd initially start off with, right? So just a rectangle for the stereo. And we've got our base. Okay, so this doesn't look too much like anything, but it gives us a lot of foundation to work with. And you can do iterations and iterations of this. It's really something that I've got to get into the habit of, is doing little thumbnails. Like, what if I wanted like to have his arms crossed? What would that look like without spending a bunch of time rendering it all out? Does that make sense? Does it look cooler? Does it look better? What if he was looking off to the right or his left? You know, like, could we do something like that? So like, just this is the point where you can start to experiment. You can experiment a lot with the simple shapes here. So what I'll do in the sketch phase in particular is have this on a separate layer, right? We'll grab a new layer on top. We'll throw down the opacity, and then we'll just keep layering on top until we're happy with the sketch, right? There's no number of particular layers that I like to do. I just keep going until it looks the way I want it to, right? So I'll just continue breaking down these shapes, keeping them simple, and kind of with each new layer, I like to clarify my thinking, if that makes sense. So just like we're trying to clean up these shapes here, we're trying to clean up our thinking, because this is like messy thinking in a way. This is just like high level, get the shapes down for giving us something to build on top of. But when we slow down and want to really understand the shapes that we're putting down and seeing if they work and sort of get a little bit more refined, that's the time to really slow down. And even simplifying things, right? So particularly with these eyes are super simple. They are literally a circle with a straight line and another half circle. And then you've got this guy's eyes, right? That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to really simplify these shapes down. Simplify the nose. Again, these lips are literally just two triangles. Oh, he looks a bit boss-eyed there, but that's okay. And this is where you just use the eraser. If it's not looking right, just don't get too tied up or too married to your initial ideas or initial lines. Always be willing to change them if needed. Eyebrows as well are a good way to sort of indicate emotion. So it looks kind of fed up. Right, and this isn't exactly the same as this. I'm not too concerned about getting this one-to-one, but it's the principles that matter. Right. What I'm thinking about is where I'm hoping you get the value from. This is where the style reference can come in really handy as well. So you can start to look at I look at these as little like challenges or problems that I've got to solve. Like the problem of the eyes, the problem of the nose, the problem of the face. How did other artists solve this problem? Did they do these eyes like more cartoony? Did they do them more realistic? Like, how did they tackle that? And how could I use and borrow their techniques? I might start to think a little bit more about the 3D. So here, this is just a little 3D indication. Instead of just doing a triangle and another rectangle kind of thing, I'll say, okay, so this arm, like this upper arm is kind of looking kind of straight on horizon wise. And then this arm is coming more towards us because it's going to be resting on his leg. So I might just throw an indication that this shape is now coming towards us. Don't have to get super technical and like measure everything out and be all perfect with the perspective and blah, blah, blah. But this is kind of what I'm thinking about. When I'm saying thinking in 3D, I might not get super detailed and actually draw out everything in 3 dimensions, but the indication of it is where it kind of counts. Right, so that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And I might just leave it. Sometimes it's even enough just to have the top edge of things just to describe the correct 3D form. That can oftentimes just be enough, especially at this stage as well. Again with the leg here, we'll just put a little indication of the knee. And since I've done this sketch, I've learned some things as well, right? So I'll integrate those into this video. And often I would actually like to have gone a little bit cleaner and slower with these sketches, I think, in the beginning as well. Like go loose at the very beginning and just start to get ideas down. But even with those lines, having some thought behind them. Alright, so now we're starting to clean this up a little bit. Now he's got his overalls, right? So again, those can just be broken down into simple shapes. You've got the triangle where it folds over. Or there's a rectangle where it folds over. Just a little indication of the button. And then I'll start to think about the orientation of the stereo. So where are we looking at this? So are we looking on, are we going to see the top of it? Cool, okay, so that gives me information about what the bottom's going to be doing. You're going to see this kind of leading edge here. Then that goes off into space, or 3D space. Alright, so now it's starting to get a little bit of structure. Still not super refined or anything yet. This takes time. Alright, so look where we started, where we're at. Okay. Now what I might do is I might just group these, duplicate it, and then this sort of flattens that into the one layer. Then sort of go down in opacity again, add another layer on top, and just continue the process until we get to the sort of cleanup step.
Again, looking at the reference, going back and forth, seeing what I can simplify. Can I make where there's all these divots and creases and things in the clothing, how can I simplify that? Can I just throw a line in here and then maybe just do one crease? Does that do it? It really depends on the style that you're going for, and that's where the style reference kicks in as well. Check out what other artists did. Do they do all the creases in the clothing, or do they really simplify them down? That's where the style reference comes in really handy. Figuring out what or how they went about solving problems. This leg needs some indication that it's going back in space. We can do that with the cuff. Right. And we can do that with the cuff here. Same materials, same limbs, you know what I mean? But different spots in perspective. This is where these simple shapes are super handy. I love just practicing these simple shapes. Pushing the shape of the shoe as well. I want his hands to be a little bit bigger. So generally the feet will be a little bit bigger as well if the hands are a little bit bigger. So this is all just playing around as well. Again, style reference. Check out what artists you like, what styles you like, and experiment. So this shoe is going to be looking directly at us. So if we can even imagine this like a box, even to simplify it even more. So this one here Got a little bit of the 3D-ness going there. So we can simplify this down into a box. We can then build on top of that box to be more triangular. That will fit more of the foot or the shoe. So this really simplifies it down. Now, I'm not going to draw it like this because it's not how, like, it's more curved, but I can think about it like this. So this foot here, it's maybe not at the exact angle. You sort of get the idea that we can really simplify these shapes down and understand it's like a tool to help us work things out. And then here, because it's looking straight at us, we might see a little bit of the top of this. If this was just a box, let's say, we might see a little bit of the top of the box, but it's not going. We're not going to see too much of the sides or underneath it. So this can be thought of like that as well. And every part of the body, every object, anything can be thought of like these simple shapes. And it really helps me to put things in perspective. I'll leave that there and throw this to the side just to sort of give you an idea. And when you've got things that look like boxes, even better. Because then you can just directly say, okay, this is a box. How is it sitting? How do I separate these into thirds to make it look like it's an actual thing on the floor or sitting in 3D space? Right. Now this is pretty much as my thought process for the initial sketch. Now I'll clean this up a lot in the next section. But I'd almost recommend taking this initial sketch and saying, okay, cool, I've got this sketch. How can I push it further? Try different poses in these simple shapes. How far can I push certain shapes? And once you sort of nailed down what you want. So I stuck pretty close to the reference here, pose-wise. Doesn't mean that you have to. Right, so then we can come in and clean up the hands and all that fun stuff. Using the same principles of simple shapes, we'll do that in the next section. Alright, so here's the cleaned up sketch. Okay, so it's sort of, you see the lines are a lot more cleaned up. The thinking's a lot more cleaned up as well. So that's the way I think of sort of cleaning up these shapes, is really cleaning up our thinking. So to do this, we've got our initial sketch that I've taken from the original session. I'm going to sort of go over it, explain what I'm thinking about, how I'm cleaning up these shapes, and yeah, let's get stuck into it. So here we've got the sketch, so we'll just rename this original sketch on that one layer. Throw down that opacity. Now, the brush I'm using here, and the one that I used for the original, is Max Greg's brushes in his Gumroad. I've linked it in the PDF, so you can check that out. It's a nice little brush, nothing super fancy either, which is nice. You can also use Ahmed Outdoori's brushes as well. The Hard Elliptical will do something similar as well. So let's get going. So here, this is where I'm starting to really think in 3D. Now, the main principles I'm thinking of when it comes to the line work is something that I've been working on, is sort of thick to thin lines, right? So you want your tablet's pen pressure to be able to do this kind of thing. Also, when it comes to the principles